Have either of you seen Luc Besson's The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc?
Never.
Never did it.
So that was my first interaction with this story, and it's Mila Jovovich as Joan of Arc because she was married to Luc Besson. Unfortunately, Luc Besson's legacy sucks because he's made like 20 films and most of them are bad. His career got a little bit derailed by Harvey Weinstein because he became obsessed with an animated series, an animated children's book called Arthur. Well, it ended up being called Arthur and the Invisibles when they made it into a movie, when he made it into a movie, and then a trilogy of movies. And Weinstein, who was notorious for getting too involved in films, chopped it to bits to make it more appealing for an American audience, quote unquote, and he made it terrible. Although I doubt it was any good to begin with. You can now watch, as of I think last year, the Luc Besson version of this movie, which is kind of cool. It's on Tubi. All that is to say, before that happened to him, and long before he made the stinker Valerian and A Million Worlds,
Oh,
and long before he was accused, although I think he's been, at least in court, exonerated.
yeah, there was lack of evidence, but he's
Right.
had a few more accusers.
Yeah, I mean,
So
you
it's
don't get a
murky.
reputation like that without being a scumbag. Before all that, he made 4 movies in the 90s that were bangers. He made La Femme Nikita, Leon the Professional, The Fifth Element, and then Joan of Arc. While he was on The Fifth Element, he left his wife, who was also in The Fifth Element, for Mila Jovovich, who was very young and in The Fifth Element, so not a great guy. I think his version of The Messenger is really dope. It's nothing like this. It's a more of a cradle to grave. Now, she was 19 when she died, so there's not much
Yeah.
life to be had. But the stuff of her as a child with her religious awakening, which is really psychedelic in the way that he portrays it, right up until then it shows her meeting, played by John Malkovich, apropos for this episode, the would-be king of France, the uncrowned king of France, and she fights for him and wins him his crown. It's got a great cast of French actors who fight alongside, who don't believe in her and then fight alongside her as she's this religious messianic figure. And then she's betrayed by, once he has his crown, he betrays her, leaves her to be caught, and then interrogated by the church. And I think the coolest thing about the movie, this was meant to be a major blockbuster. This was a movie that Besson was developing with Catherine Bigelow. Then he more or less stole it from her. She sued him. They settled out of court. But this was supposed to be her movie. Hard to know if a woman or a Frenchman should have made it. You could go either way. But what I think is so neat is when they finally get to this part, the Passion of Joan of Arc, the trial part of the story, you have a very similar, everyone interrogating her is ugly and nasty and conspiring against her. And then it's her alone in her cell having an argument with her conscience, portrayed by Dustin Hoffman in a cloak.
For real?
Yeah. It's I think it's amazing where he's
That's
the one
wild.
who's like, you have this, she had these visions of Jesus earlier in the movie and she's dancing with him and it's a little bit predatory. The way that this movie handles religion is also very interesting. And then, was that Hoffman's challenging her? Was that Jesus? Was that the devil? Are you following God? Or were you always just holding a banner? Or were you sometimes holding a sword? How many men did you actually kill? And so there's like a back and forth between them. And honestly, the fact that Jovovich had this in her is pretty wild considering I mean, she married a different guy and then did his Resident Evil films for the rest of her.
Oh, they're
The
married.
other Paul Anderson, right?
The other Paul Anderson, right?
Yeah.
Paul W.S. Anderson.
WS, yeah.
She's good. I mean, like she's good in The Fifth Element, but it's like sort of she's more of an object than a person. But here, the whole movie rests on her, and she's very, very good. So I recommend it. It's not the same. It takes a totally different view, and it was panned. It bombed and it was panned. And I think
That's why I never saw it, probably, is that, yeah, the reviews were pretty bad. So
I'm telling you, this movie rocks.
yeah.
If you
Yeah.
only look at Luc Besson's career in the 90s, he's one of the best. Unfortunately, his career went on past the 90s.